requiring the installation of new chemical handling processes to comply with the environmental requirements for the production and storage of dangerous chemicals can be classified as asset, even though it will not directly increase the future economic benefit from a particular property, plant, and equipment. Before I forget, class, one of the items that should be part of your stock knowledge as regards PPE class would be the rule for the initial measurement or initial recognition of PPE. On initial recognition class, an item of PPE must be measured at cost. That is why the standard also defines what cost is. And we have already settled this one, in which the concept of cost here is similar to the concept of cost we've encountered in the other standards. So if you will be asked, what's the initial measurement for PPE? How should an item of PPE be measured upon initial recognition? Our answer would be that it is to be measured at cost. Now, just like your inventories class, there will be problems on determining as to what the cost will be. But with regard to PPE class, more confusion, more difficulty is expected in determining its cost. Since PPE is a long-term asset class, it's possible that we will have to incur costs to improve and maintain the asset. Now, upon initial recognition, there's no problem identifying the initial cost because it is simply the amount that you have spent for the acquisition of the asset. The bigger problem for the cost of a PPE class is with regard to the cost that you incur subsequent to its initial recognition. With regard to the costs that you will incur not on the year of acquisition but on the subsequent years. Because of the nature of PPE class, it's possible that certain costs should be capitalized, certain costs should be included in the cost of a PPE even though it was incurred after the initial recognition of the asset. Normally, class, when we say cost, we only pertain to the initial cost of acquiring the asset, including the directly attributable cost to bring the asset to its intended use location and condition. But because of the nature of your PPE class, it's possible that subsequent cost after acquisition cost should be included in the cost of the asset. So again, no problem as to initial costs class. It is very easy to determine whether the cost should be capitalized or not. The bigger problem is with regard to subsequent cost. Because the general rule class is subsequent costs should be expensed. But again, because of the nature of PPE, it cannot be avoided that the benefit will derive from costs incurred after the acquisition date class are material or instrumental for the continued use of the asset. Now, although the standard did not state it like this class, but to simplify the rule class in determining whether a subsequent cost should be capitalized or not, whether it should be capitalized or expensed, the simplified question I want students to ask themselves is whether the subsequent cost increases or improves the life of the asset, improves its capacity or efficiency. So if originally class the life of the asset is only 10 years, but because of the subsequent cost you've incurred, the effect is that the expected life of the asset increased to 15 years, then that cost should be capitalized. That cost should be included in the carrying amount or the cost of the asset. If an additional cost was incurred to increase the capacity or improve the performance of the asset, then that cost should also be capitalized or included in the cost or carrying amount of the asset. But if the purpose of the cost class is to maintain the asset only, if the cost does not increase the life or improve its efficiency or capacity class, then that cost should not be capitalized. That cost should be expensed. So again, the test class that you will have to apply is whether or not the subsequent cost will or can increase the life of the asset or improve its efficiency or capacity. Now, number 9 is somewhat peculiar class because this is a specific cost class required by the standard to be capitalized, to be included in the cost of the asset, even though it is a subsequent cost. So just remember number 9 class. If it makes the asset environmentally compliant class, then that cost should be capitalized. Again, I would have to emphasize, class. If we were talking about costs incurred at the date of acquisition, class, then the costs that would be capitalized should only be those that are necessary to bring the asset to its intended use, location, and condition. Here, you should remember your directly attributable costs. So those costs, class, that we have learned before that are not considered to be a directly attributable cost should also be expense, should not be part of the cost of the asset. Now, with regard to subsequent costs, class, definitely we cannot say that they are necessary costs to bring the asset to its intended use, location, and condition because this already happened after the asset was initially acquired. If this was a necessary cost, then we would not have been able to use the asset if we did not spend for this cost. But since this is a subsequent cost, class, meaning the asset has already reached its intended use, location, and condition. That is why there is a greater challenge in determining what subsequent costs should be capitalized. So again, supposedly all subsequent costs should be expense, class, should not be part of the cost of the asset. But if ever it increases the life of the asset or improves its efficiency or capacity, then the cost may be capitalized or included in the cost of the asset. Capitalization of a subsequent cost, class, is more of an exemption than a general rule. Our general rule is that subsequent costs should be expensed because they are understandably not necessary costs to bring the asset to its intended use, location, and condition. Which leads us to number 10, class. The cost of the day-to-day servicing of an item of PPE is included in the carrying amount of an item of PPE. So again, if it's just maintenance, class, if it's just repairs, it should not be capitalized but should be expensed. So number 10 here is false. It should not be included in the carrying amount. The day-to-day costs, class, to service or maintain the PPE should be expensed.